everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I upload videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. If you're new here, do feel free to have a look around, look in our video list and in our playlist. There is a ton of inspiration here to help you start experimenting with your textiles and threads. If you're a regular, thank you so much for keeping coming back. I really appreciate you being here. So today we are in week 3 of July's Winging It panel. This year in Winging It we're making a textile journal. We're making panels that reflect things that are happening in our lives and in the world around us. So for July we're creating a holiday postcard. Now, back in week 1, we experimented with at-home batik using candles and watercolours to create our background. And last week, we experimented with Zentangle style stitching. So we were using stitches to create texture and patterns in the different elements of our image. Today, we're focusing on the water and the sky. So I'm going to carry on working in variegated threads. And we're going to add some texture to bring that part of our scene to life. So gather some bits and pieces and let's get stitching.
So this is where we got up to last week, and the more I've looked at it, the more I'm enjoying it. I hope you've enjoyed it too. It was so relaxing to stitch and I just love the different textures and patterns that are developing. We spent last week adding our Zentangle style stitches, so we were using stitch to create patterns and shapes in the various sections of our work, and I also took you through all the different kinds of variegated threads that you can get hold of. I'm thinking it's starting to look increasingly like a kind of print, like one of those old-fashioned printed postcards that, rather than photographs, were created with wood prints or block prints or screen prints and mass produced, and I really love that. There's something of yesteryear about it. It feels a bit retro to me. So today we're going to focus on the lake and the sky, and I want to make sure I don't lose these striations that we created by streaking on the wax. We've got this lovely cloudy area along here, so I have got some blues and greens here that I'm going to make use of. I found a couple more variegated threads. So this one is called Monet's Garden. This is a DMC colour variations. That's 4030, and I've also got this one which is called Caribbean Bay, which is a lot darker, so there's more sort of dark tones in there, far more aqua and teal. This one's much more sort of watery green. I do quite like them both. Then I've got these sulky threads that we talked about last week. This is a 12 weight thread, a bit like a pearl cotton, nice and fine, and so that one's gonna look lovely. I think that's got shades of grey green and turquoise, and then we've got this deeper blue as well that's got some sorts of French navy in there that I think is quite nice. And this one, we'll have to see how this one goes because it is definitely very green, but if I just sit it on the lake, it blends actually really quite well, and I think we could have a bit of fun with that. And I've pulled this one out of my stash. It's a blue and white variegated, so it's got this sort of greyish pale blue and it goes all the way through to almost white, and that's going to give me the white tones that I'm after, I think. So that's my little selection. I may dig around for some more, who knows. Let's see how we get on. So I've been thinking about what patterns we can create in the sky. So what I'm going to do is just take my heat erase pen and kind of outline them. So I've gone a little way along and we want to sort of try and disguise this, particularly this blotch here. So what I'm thinking I'll do is create some cloud shapes following the shapes that the paint has made. So we've got our sort of line there, we've also got a shape there, and then we've got a shape here, like that, and we've got a shape here, shape there, and then we've got this shape along here. Let's work out what we're going to do with this. Let's go up there like that. And I thought I could use some of the sulky thread. I want something quite fine for this one. I'm going to start by doing a back stitch. So I'm just going to come up a little way in from the edge, and go back to the edge and then go along a stitch length further on. These don't have to be tiny. So I'm effectively quilting the shapes of the cloud into the sky. And because we've got our batting behind, we're going to get hopefully some really nice padded clouds with this variegated outline. I definitely didn't want to lose the watery effect. We've kept it really well on the other sections, and I wanted to do the same up here, but I do want to create some pattern and texture on the sky. Now obviously the sky isn't especially textured, particularly when it's sunny. So the little cloud formations that we do have, I wanted to make them a bit of a feature. So we're going to keep all the watery marks in between the clouds and in the sky as a whole, but we'll have this quilted outline, and then we're going to add something more to jazz it up a bit. This sulky thread is really lovely because the variegations are so subtle, but they are there. So the stitches that I'm doing now are much paler than the ones I started with. So it's going to be really gentle transitions across the panel. I'm just turning the panel as I go, and hopefully you can see how that's starting to look. We're getting this kind of quilted feel. When I go back in along the bottom edge, that's going to be even more effective, so that cloud will puff forward a little bit because of the stitching around it. So I'm going to do that outline, and then I'll come back and show you the next stage. Okay, so here's our outline, and I hope you can see I've gone in with my heat erase pen and I've kind of filled in the spaces around. So I've outlined my outlines, and then the spaces that are left I've also gone around, and I'm going to go in with my light blue sulky thread. I quite like the weight of this thread in the sky. I'm going to focus on the lower bit, and I thought I'd also try out, I don't know how it's going to look, so we'll have a go and see whether we like it. One of the ways I'm going to define the branches, I think, is to put a line of blue in the sky that shows through the branches. So I'm going to use my light blue for that, and then that'll give me scope to come back in with a variegated brown to put the tree trunks in. But I'm just going to do exactly the same technique again. Let's start down here, and hopefully you'll be able to see the effect I'm going for. So this is again very sort of Zentangle in its style. Filling in these spaces with patterns and lines to just add some visual interest. This is lovely thread to stitch with. I do recommend it. It's like silk, it's just going through the fabric so beautifully. I'm having a lovely time again. So another relaxing stitch project, I think, if you are away on holiday and very little to take with you, as long as you've got threads in the colours that you have used in your design, that's all you need to take. There's no blending, there's no chopping and changing between threads. You can just stitch and not worry about where it's going, and everyone can do back stitch. You can't go wrong. What might be nice with some of these lines is to lace it or whip it. So taking another line of thread underneath the stitches, and I'm just stitching outside the box a little bit here, so my running stitch that is holding, my tacking that's holding the piece together, if you remember last week, because of the stitch, the quilting pulls the fabric in a little bit, and so even though my tacking lines followed the aperture perfectly, that's what I drew around, you can see that it's pulled in a little bit now, so it's gone a little bit wide. The stitching is no longer exactly following the tacking lines and the lines of the aperture, so I can, because I've got excess around the edge, I can take that into account. I just need to make sure the stitching goes far enough over. So probably still need another stitch or so, but I can balance it out a little bit. So it's going to look a little bit like that, and I really like it. It's getting it all a little bit Vincent van Gogh, hasn't isn't it? Those swirly lines. So just really enjoying the idea of adding pattern. I think it's a lot of fun. I'm just carrying on around because I don't want to be stopping and starting my thread. I've gone round, and because my aperture is going to come a bit further over, it just makes sure that there's stitching everywhere that I need it. Again, I think this will help maintain that watery paint, but just add some interest and texture into this area of sky, and again it gives the sense that there are clouds there as well. We'll see how this looks over this section where I've got the green that has bled, and if I need to add in some more blue, I can put another line of stitching in between. So I think it does still look very green, so we can either go back. I'll show you two ways that you can do it. We'll see which one we think looks best. So you can either go back in with another line of backstitch. So the more blue you add, the less obvious that green will be. So that has, I think, toned that green down a little bit. Another thing that you can do is do some woven stitching between the two. Because we've now got lines of backstitch, we can also weave our thread through those stitches. So I've gone up there, I'm hopping across to the next stitch. Be easier if I did it with the eye of my needle. Not used to having a sharp needle. It's catching the fabric, and then hop along to the next one and go up, hop along to the next one and go down, hop along again and go up. So I'm just weaving backwards and forwards along those stitches, and that's another way that you could fill any gaps that you're not happy about. Just put in a sort of zigzagging line through the stitches like that. So if you wanted to do a little bit of woven stitching, you can do that as well. So I'm going to backstitch all of the additional lines, and then we'll see if it needs anything else. Okay then, so I've been struggling a little bit to decide what to do on my lake area. There's so much lovely texture. I wanted to do something similar. I don't want to use any of the stitches that I've already used, and I just couldn't come up with an idea. I've looked through all of my books that I normally look to for inspiration. I've looked back through some of my past work, and nothing seemed to fit just quite right. And I'm trying to bear in mind as well that this is a lake and not the sea, so I don't want to create waves. I don't want to create foam, even though it's lighter. We're basically implying the water's getting shallower rather than that it's getting foamy. And so I went back to my trusty process of sketching, and I hope you can see this. My first idea was to put some shallow cross stitches all over it, and I did quite like the way that looked, but I wondered whether it was just too angular for water that is meant to be just quite smooth and ripply. So I started putting in some chain stitch shapes and couldn't get an idea of what it was going to look like, so I went back and copied it again, or used my second copy, and put some more chain stitch shapes over the surface, and I think this is going to work. I do have another thing that I'm going to do with the water. I'll do that next week, but I did think that was going to work quite nicely, so that's what I'm going to go for. I had a route through my drawers and found another couple of pearl cotton, so I happened to find another Finca cotton. I thought I'd only bought one, but apparently I haven't. I've got this lovely aqua variegated thread, so I'm definitely going to use that one. And this one is very similar in colour. This one's a little bit more green than this one. I don't know whether that picks up on the camera, but the thread's thicker, so I think we can create some interesting texture. And I've got my others that I've planned to use as well, so we've got a whole range of colours here. So this one will probably feature more in this corner, and then we'll get paler as we go towards the shore. So let's start with some Monet's Garden. I hope this works. I think let's just trust the process. I've threaded up 2 strands in my needle and I'm turning my work vertically because I want these to follow kind of horizontals, and I'm just going to come in and we're going to just create little clusters. So chain stitch we've done many times, but I'll just show you again. So I brought my thread through, I'm going to take my thread round in a loop, go back in where the thread came out, and then I'm going to rock my needle forward so that it comes up inside that loop, and then when I pull through that will get caught on my working thread, and then I'm just going to hop over and put a little anchor stitch over that loop to hold it in place. So that is a chain stitch, and I'm just going to work these fairly randomly across the panel. I'm going to try and make my stitches get generally smaller the further back I go. So let's just work around this front area. So some can be small even in the foreground, you don't have to be absolutely fastidious about this. You can have stitches of different shapes and sizes, and sometimes you can work back in the opposite direction. So I've done lots working towards myself. Let's throw in a couple of stitches that go back in the opposite direction. I'm just going to work along, and when I run out of thread I'll change to a different colourway. So that, I'm really liking the way that the variegation is starting to emerge. Let me bring it up a bit closer. Really subtle variegation, and we're starting to get some nice texture, and again we're keeping the integrity of the batik even though we're adding stitch over the top. So I'm just going to keep going and filling in this space. I'll check back in when I've put some more colours in so that you can see how it's going. I've been stitching probably for about an hour, and this is where we're up to so far, and I think this is working quite well to add to the batik effect rather than take away from it. So this is looking really active. Now it is quite difficult on such a busy background to see where your stitching is and where the gaps are, so can I recommend flipping it over onto the back, and it shows me that I need to do a fair bit more around the edge of the water here. There's no stitching, which means that the sort of texture is not going to be even at this point. So that's a little tip to help you. So now I've seen that, I can see actually there's a lot of space around here that has got no stitching on it. I think I'm happy to leave the rest of the water as it is, but I'm just going to fill in the gaps around here, and then we'll see if we need something of an outline. I don't know whether we do or we don't yet, so I'm just going to fill in a little bit more in probably the palest of thread, so maybe this one that's got lots of white in it, or this one. And I'm really liking the different textures of thread as well. If I bring it up close, hopefully you can see there that there is some thicker thread as well as some much finer thread, and it's giving lots of different textures. So I think it's working quite well on the surface of the water there. So I'm just going to finish that off, and then we'll see where we've got up to for today. Okay, so I think that's where we're going to leave it for this week. I've stitched around the edge and I think it's quilted down enough now to just leave it as it is. I'm just going to bring in my aperture so that you can see what it's looking like. So here's our Zentangle batik postcard so far, and I'm just loving this. I'm doing my favourite thing to do, whichever piece I'm working on, that's what's my favourite, but I am really loving this one. I think it's working out better than I'd hoped. So next week we're going to add our finishing touches and our border, and you will need some beads next week. We're going to add a little bit of sparkle to get things going, and we're going to make this a little bit more postcard like. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Really simple one this week, but plenty of mindful stitching for you to be getting on with through the week. If you have enjoyed this and want something similar, I will link a video over here, and I will put the whole playlist for all our Winking It panels down at the bottom left there. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more textile inspiration. I will see you soon. Bye!